Hey everybody, welcome back into Atlanta. This is the Westin Peachtree, site of Ohio State's Offensive Media Day. There was a late change. We'll get into that for who we talked to. And yeah, I know. There's not a lot of ambiance in here.
Yeah, it's vibeless.
It's quiet. We just, after last night's Roosters Report, got a little wild. So let's get something nice and cozy.
Yeah, subdued. If we had a fire here, it would be really nice. I could start one.
You should. So what did we do? I took this pillow out of the media hospitality suite. Yeah. Maybe I'll use it to take a nap later on.
Not a bad idea.
I don't know. But anyway, it's Tuesday in Atlanta as Ohio State gets ready to play Georgia on Saturday night in the college football playoff at the Peach Bowl. And we spoke Berm with Kevin Wilson, CJ Stroud, Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., Paris Johnson. And then we were expecting Mayan Williams. And then lo and behold, Chip Trayanum popped in there.
Yep, we traded chop for a chip.
Chop for chip.
And, I don't know that it necessarily means anything to be worried about. I mean, it is just one of those things that happens when you're on bowl trips. Guys' schedules change. But I do think it speaks to the fact that I wouldn't be surprised if you see a bit of a running back by committee approach on Saturday. I know everyone is going to be expecting a healthy Mayan Williams to be the starter. From what we gleaned from talking to people off the record, he seems fine. He looked fine last night at the College Football Hall of Fame. So I don't think there's any physical limitations there, but I do think it speaks to what Chip Trayanum has done since he's taken the move back to running back. He said today that in his heart of hearts, he always kind of hoped that he'd get a chance to go back to running back. And it seems like he is willing and wanting to really grab that opportunity. And there's so many things about what happened in the Michigan game that people want to lament, understandably. But Chip Trayanum played pretty well that game. And I think the biggest issue Ohio State had, and we talked about this before, is that they stopped giving the ball to Chip Trayanum. So I do think you're going to see a lot of him this Saturday. And I thought that coming into today, and now that last-minute switcheroo certainly, codifies that.
Yeah, today I think reinforced that idea. I asked Chip a number of things about Mayan. Mayan is fully healthy in terms of the high ankle. There's a lot of illness going around the world. I think that's why they gave Mayan tapped out, let the backup go handle media day this morning. We saw Mayan last night, as you said, walking around just fine in good spirits. That in itself is not a big deal. In terms of Saturday night and beyond, we had this conversation with Ryan Day when the signing day period opened last week that what do you have to do at running back? Well, it depends on what Chip Trayanum decides for his career. Well, it just seems very clear if the decision is up to Chip Trayanum deep down that he wants to be a running back. And it's interesting how that's transpired over the course of a year because you and I had a conversation with him right around Christmas last year when he made that decision to return to Ohio State. He's going to play linebacker, and we saw that being a great fit. And we talked about Steel Chambers. But, that opportunity for him, especially if Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers return for another year.
Which we think they will.
Which is probably quite likely. Well, I don't know that there's a clear path to being a starter at either spot.
Yeah.
But he was very effective against Michigan. And I think in a game like this, you probably don't want to rely solely on Mayan Williams, especially if there is any uncertainty. Hasn't been back into game speed in a month and hasn't played that way in 6-7 weeks since the high ankle sprain. So yeah, Chip Trayanum's going to play a big role in that. And
well, it's not even just the Mayan Williams situation at running back either. It's the fact that Travion Henderson, we expect, will miss spring football at Ohio State. So if by some chance Mayan Williams decides to head off to the NFL, which again we don't think will happen at this juncture, but you don't know if he goes out and has a big game on Saturday, and he could change things, in the blink of an eye. So that depth at running back is a little bit suspect as you still wait for Evan Pryor to get healthy. Now you're without Travion Henderson for at least the next 4 months. Like that changes things, but it also changes things at linebacker for guys like C.J. Hicks, who people are sort of waiting for him to get that opportunity. And if you look at the linebacker spot, and we do expect Tommy and Steele to return, regardless of what happens in the playoff, then it certainly opens the door for guys like C.J. and Cody Simon to have a very regular role next year, provided that Cody decides to come back for his fifth year. So there's a lot of moving parts, but that's why you recruit athletes who can play all over the field, and you can do a lot of creative things.
CJ Hicks did not tear his ACL, by the way.
Yeah, he was walking around just fine and was laughing at the report that apparently, I don't know where it came from. I'd never seen it. So, but if you're worried about CJ Hicks because he hurt himself on the opening kickoff of the Michigan game, don't. He's fine. Okay,
back to the offense. A lot of time, where would you like to go next? Because we have Kevin Wilson splitting time. He has 3 phones in his pocket.
Yeah.
You have CJ Stroud getting peppered as we expected and previewed with Bill Landis on the podcast daily on Tuesday morning about running the football. I asked him about the tempo stuff that Bill's going to write about this week at ohiostate.rivals.com. Marvin, they brought the Monarch down here for him.
Did they?
It's set up in a ballroom at the team hotel. He's running routes on the Monarch in the hotel.
That's what he should do.
That's crazy.
No, I mean, do you want to be great or do you want to be average?
Okay, well, he does want a gold jacket.
And Marvin wants to be the best receiver who's ever lived, and that's how you do it. You don't go dancing in ballrooms. You go tiptoeing the sideline in ballrooms. That's the way it works. Now, I think the important thing, again, as we've talked about it a couple times, but the only way Ohio State wins this game on Saturday is if CJ Stroud plays his best game. But the underlying theme that we heard today in the press conference is that they don't need to be perfect. They need to be aggressive, and they need to play the game that is their best game, which is attacking football. We've watched Ohio State all year, and this is something we've talked about on every single snap judgment. Like, the play calling feels like they're holding themselves back. They're making things harder for themselves. Go out there and play your most aggressive game, and if you swing as hard as you can and you get beat, great. But if you go out there and you're pulling punches and you're not trying to really push tempo and change the way that the game is coming at you, because that's really what this is about. This is, no one's going to give you the national championship. Like, you have to win the national championship. You're not going to get it by default. Georgia is not going to lose this game on their own. They're not going to lose this game by handing it to Ohio State. The Buckeyes will have to take it. So that was sort of the vibe I got today, that they really understand, like, they're going to go out there and let it all hang out.
Yeah, but how they do that, I think, is interesting, because like other conversations, like Ryan Day wants to vary tempo. He doesn't. I keep thinking, and I asked everybody specifically about the Sugar Bowl against Clemson, and that felt like the last time, really, that from start to finish, the game plan was, this is going to be up tempo, no huddle, no checks to the sideline, and good luck trying to adjust or steal signs, however you want to. And I don't think that Ohio State believes that's what they have to do or that they want to do against Georgia. Now, they're not going to give the game plan to me on a Tuesday. I certainly understand that part. But there were a lot of clues picked up.
They gave it to me.
They did give it to you?
Yeah.
Shoot.
We'll have that on Thursday morning on the podcast.
Wow. You might not want to give that to Georgia because they're watching.
Nobody's watching
all of the Roosters reports. I hope somebody's watching.
Nobody from Georgia's watching.
Yeah, maybe.
It's not Greg Schiano's program. It's Kirby Sparks.
That's the second Chop reference of the show. CJ, I asked him about that and the ability to vary tempo, and if they needed to do that more, how comfortable he is with that. And he said something that I thought was pretty interesting, which is that he views his strength as being able to look at a defense, read coverages, and get a feel for what play that they need to be in. And I don't know how to take that necessarily, because from what we're asking about the potential of going full octane all the way, pedal down, because he wants some opportunity to make pre-snap reads. And you're not necessarily allowed that if you're just going, here's the play, get it off in 15 seconds. So I think there's some element of this where Justin Fields against Clemson had no problem with that. And
because
the coaching
if
staff,
something was wrong, Justin would just take off.
It'd just take off and go. And that may not work as well for CJ Stroud. And I'm not trying to like push back on any of the other things that a lot of people want, which is up-tempo Ohio State and a quarterback who's running the football. And I don't think that CJ is actually going to run it that much on Saturday night. And not just because he won't.
Yeah.
I just don't think that those two things match what this iteration of Ohio State's offense wants to do.
Well, there was one of the Georgia media members who asked CJ, he said, I talked to an NFL scout and they said the one knock on you is that you don't improvise. And CJ said, I am who I am. I'm the best pocket passer in the country. That's what I should do. That's not exactly what he said. It's not verbatim, but it's paraphrased.
This newspaper, by the way, has a terrible franchise that's going to be drafting a quarterback soon. He was sent here specifically to write about CJ.
Yeah, and decided to talk to him. So that's interesting. But
Talk what?
The reality is, and CJ, as much as people want him to be Justin Fields, he's not.
Yeah, he's not.
And it's been 3 years in the program and 2 years, 2 Heisman finalists. Like, at some point, we just have to accept that this is what he is, and he's great. Like, he's great. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the history of Ohio State football. So why try to force him to be something he's not? He's not Tate Martell. You know what I mean?
That's probably a good thing.
He's not out there to scramble. He's out there to throw the football and facilitate and deliver the offense. And when you have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming and Cade Stover and all these guys that are weapons, like, to me, that's probably a good thing that he's not out there running the ball, because CJ running it for 6 yards when he can throw it for 60 doesn't make sense. Now, of course, we all see the film. Like, there are times when he needs to get a first down and doesn't. That's the type of thing that's going to happen this week. It's not going to be completely improvising every play and being Justin Fields, because that's just not who he is. But he needs to be willing, and he said it over and over today, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to win the game. So that's why you have to sort of just assume that he realizes there are moments. And we did see it in the last month of the season. He did get a little bit more aggressive with his legs. It just needs to take the next step.
I think it's important to keep in mind that CJ cannot improvise by himself. So I would answer that question for that reporter by pointing out that there are different and less experienced wide receivers throughout this whole year. Marvin Harrison has been fantastic. No question about that. Has he developed a ton of improvisational, route, scramble drill running routes for him? Probably not. Emeka has been hurt. Julian Fleming has been hurt. It was different when you had Jackson Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave doing a lot of that stuff that they'd been doing for years.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes maybe we don't, sometimes people forget how relatively young both Emeka and Marvin still are, and that Julian hasn't played a ton of football. The example that came to mind for me for the best improv completion of the season was CJ against Notre Dame in the opener against Mayan Williams. Well, this is going to be something that happens a lot for Ohio State, and it didn't necessarily. I don't think that that's CJ's fault. I think that it's crazy to look at it this way, but once you remove Jackson from the picture, not just the structure of the offense changed, but the out of structure changed. And he can't do it all by himself. This is not to make excuses for anybody, or CJ included. But some of that stuff, it is relevant. You have to work at it.
Yeah, you have to weigh this stuff. And one thing that I always get frustrated with is that whenever I feel like there's an attempt to explain why something may not be happening, it comes off as being an excuse, and it's not. The facts are, CJ is not Justin Fields, and what you're saying is true. But also what people are asking for is true. He still has to, if he sees open field and it's 3rd and 6, he needs to take it. So all of these things have to work in tandem. And that's really the interesting thing, that you have players like Paris Johnson and Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison, who they just have to play their best game. And can they? And they've all said, Paris was talking about today, that he really thinks they've been super physical the last month of the season, the last month of practices, trying to get ready for Georgia. Mm-hmm. And he said he's just looking forward to lining up and hitting someone. So that's something I've never heard out of Paris's mouth. Even though you always see it, he plays a very violent and aggressive game. To hear him say, I'm just really ready to hit someone, that's different.
Yeah, he should also have Matthew Jones with him on that offensive line, according to Kevin Wilson, according to Paris Johnson.
According to everyone.
According to everybody, he's good to go. There may still be an element where Josh Fryer has to be ready as the next guy in. As Kevin Wilson said, maybe something happens with Donovan Jackson. I expect that Josh Fryer would be in line there. That would be the plan moving forward. We spent a lot of time for the last 3 weeks trying to get a read on that situation for the offensive line. The indication was that Matthew Jones has been full go for the last 2 weeks. They referenced it being just an ankle and not something more structurally damaging, where it looked like it certainly could have been as he left against Maryland. So that's a little bit of clarity on that we haven't had previously. It was a little bit, of that high ankle sort of sprain, and it looks like Matthew Jones will be ready to go and play on Saturday night. That's a pretty big deal.
Ohio State talked about it on Monday. Like, nobody wanted to lose to Michigan. Nobody wanted to not win the Big Ten championship. But it is hard as you look at it now and think about this as potentially a 2-game season. It's hard not to be like, whew, we got a little bit of an extra break that you kind of needed. And everyone seems to be healthy. We have not heard any. No one else showed up randomly in a boot or anything crazy. Right. So that's great news. And if you're going to beat Georgia, it's going to have to be at full strength. And I did ask Marvin Harrison a very important question.
Okay, let's get down to it.
I asked him when he's packing his stuff to transfer to USC. And he said, and I quote, "Where do they come up with this stuff?"
You dropped out again.
I'm sorry. There was a word in there. So I don't know where this...
Does it start with an F or S?
I'll leave that to the imagination. The question is, folks, if you're wondering or worried that Marvin Harrison is transferring to USC, please don't. I mean, America, come on. It's been a while since I've dropped in America. We got to have a real talk about this.
Let's talk also to Joel Klatt, right?
Well, I don't know that he was referencing Marvin specifically. But
nobody does. That's why it was irresponsible to say, I think that there's somebody on a playoff team who's going to transfer in the portal.
And then that morphed into a Biletnikoff finalist, and there's only 3 Biletnikoff finalists, so people...
was not what he said. Like, where did that come from? Then this weird game of telephone that it was a Biletnikoff finalist who was going to transfer. Like, that part was not even said.
I don't know. Obviously, I did ask him about it for real, jokingly, because I know it's a farce.
Wait, for real or for jokes?
I joked with him about it for real, because I know it's a farce. But I do think it's funny that even guys like Marvin, who are not really active social media users, like, they see all this stuff and they know, like, CJ Hicks coming up and asking about this report that he tore his ACL. They're like, where does this stuff come from? And it's just, we're living in such a different, crazy, negative, like, obsessed world that sometimes it is hard to know what's real and what's fake. But what's real is that Ohio State's healthy. They're ready for Georgia, it seems like. They have another practice today. They're going to a hospital today to do some goodwilling.
And then they're playing basketball tonight.
They're playing basketball against Georgia tonight. Hopefully nobody sprains an ankle. Really good idea. You know what?
Cool events, Peach Bowl.
I'm just going to say this. I think it's great to get the teams together and have them do some fun activities. We're living in a time when 99% of the people in the world have the flu.
Well, I think that's the great neutralizer.
Yeah, maybe putting them all in the same room so that they're all
You don't get to say, well, this hotel was sterile and this team had the built-in advantage. Like, think about if that had happened, if before the game in 2021,
if everyone had to spend time together.
They all had to, like, go into a room and have dinner. Like, maybe the outcome would have been different.
I don't think it's a bad idea to have them get together with Georgia and do stuff, but I do think having them play basketball these guys use their ankles on Saturday in the football game. I think that's probably bad. Like, let's get them to play checkers or something.
Ooh, that'd be good.
Checkers, a chess competition, something using their brains, not their brawns.
Oh,
but I feel like we know there's a lot of stuff coming this week, and I just wanted to talk about the CJ Marvin stuff because this is the Roosters Report, and we're going to report on whatever we feel like roostering about.
I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense.
Nothing I say makes sense.
That's what happens when we get together on the podcast. We hope you enjoyed this very elaborate prop for our set today.
It's a beautiful pillow.
Maybe we'll borrow it again tomorrow. Ohio State's defense will be in the spotlight. We'll get that roster of 5 players in Jim Knowles later on today. We've got a lot more coverage, of course, coming your way from Atlanta ahead of the Peach Bowl on Saturday night, Ohio State and Georgia. He's Berm. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you later.